Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, my dear friends, brothers and sisters, and viewers of IQRA TV. I hope you've had a good break. Whatever it is that you like during the break, I hope you've enjoyed that. Before we went for our break, we were talking about young people and how we seem to have lost that very powerful Asian Muslim ethos about hard work, discipline, etiquette, efficiency in terms of how we work, how we network, respect, value our neighbors and our friends, and respect for the law that people had in the 60s and the 70s. And that seems to have disappeared, and we're trying to unfathom and sort of break down the conundrum as to where things have gone wrong. And as I said, it's not just within our community, it affects all communities, but the impact of how our young people behave has got much more significance than any other communities in this country. And in my guest today is Akram. Akram Butt, as you know, is a man who has become a role model, not through a design, but because of his background. He played in rugby at an international level. He's become a role model for many young people who inspire to get involved in sports. But beyond that, he's also worked in other areas as well. We talked about the work that he's done in schools, but he mentioned something as we were going into the break, and that is Mosaic. Now, just give our viewers a flavour of what Mosaic was all about before we start discussing it, please.
Well, Mosaic is an initiative which was founded by His Royal Highness Prince Charles on the back of wanting to do something for the Muslim community, because when it first was launched, it was specific a mentoring program for young children who were disenfranchised, lost to the system. They wanted to use role models, mainly from the business community, but from all walks of life, to come into schools and talk to the children, and hopefully with the idea of inspiring them to do better than what they are doing. And it certainly took off extremely well. I thoroughly enjoyed my time going to schools, communities, speaking to the children, getting that feedback and understanding what are some of the issues in our local schools and community and at home. And the business leaders were able to, and these business leaders were for the local community. So it wasn't a case of people from outside of the area, born and bred in that area, grew up in that same area and suffered some of the same issues. However, they went on to better themselves through business, and most of them were very successful business people and business women who continue to do good work, not only in business but for the community as well, so giving something back. At the moment, it's broadened its horizons with the project, and initially it was specific Muslims, but it's broadened itself out now to children, young people, all communities, and they've attached some additional programs to them, and it's running with success.
Well, Mosaic is one of the most successful programs when it comes to mentoring young people, boys and girls, young men and women, in the country at the moment. And Prince Charles, His Royal Highness, is very proud of it, no doubt about it. And I'm sure, your involvement at the beginning has a lot to do with that.
Well, I really enjoy myself, and anything what is going to be a benefit to young children. When I look at myself, how did I achieve? I certainly had mentors and role models, and still do.
Right.
And we need to get to that stage where we're providing mentors and role models for our children to raise their aspirations. So let me just speak on that.
Mentors and role models. Now, how important? I mean, we talked about fathers, right? And you talked about how your father was a very important role model and a mentor for you. It seems like fathers nowadays, and we talked about this, touched on this, about this disconnect between the fathers and young children. I mean, I know, for example, that when it comes to cricket, for example, in Batley, I've been told by many people that not many Asian fathers drive their kids to the cricket games. The clubs have to rely on getting the transport arranged. Whereas if you look at in other communities, particularly the white community, the father will go with them and spend the whole day, with the son playing cricket or watching cricket and encouraging. How can we change that element? I mean, I still see now on rugby fields, for children, there's loads of parents there watching their children play, encouraging them, supporting them. But we never ever see an Asian parent, except for the rare example. What do you think? Why do you think that is? have we sort of seen sport as a negative?
Yeah.
And is it mosque, madrasas, deen more important than sports, etc.? Whereas the Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself was very actively involved in sports, in jogging, in archery, swimming, etc.
Yeah.
Why is it? Is it cultural, do you think?
I mean, there's no simple answer to that. I think it's quite difficult. We talked about role models and we talked about parents. I was very fortunate, so my father was a fantastic role model. But sadly, he passed away when I was only 11. So I didn't have my father at that stage, but I still continued to succeed. And the ingredients that he laid down for me, respect, character, discipline, has stood me in good stead. So I was able to continue that.
So you lost your father at the age of 11?
Yeah, so
the foundation he laid for you.
Yeah, 100%, and it was at such an early stage. Yeah, my mother, mashallah, she continued as a mother and father within my sort of family network, and also we had I didn't have the privilege to, or as a lot of families do, have that extended family. That's a big issue, something that we've not really discussed, and that plays a large part in the upbringing of children.
Definitely,
and the new generation are going away from the extended small nuclear, so we need to come back and respect those values about bringing up. Play a large part. In regards to role models, not all parents are good role models. I think we need to recognise that.
Yes.
So sometimes children are looking at other avenues for that role model, that mentor to look up to. Sometimes they get caught into bad role models even outside that family environment. And we mentioned early on about the media, which role models they portray. Sometimes they're portraying negative, how we would perceive as negative role models, as positive role models. But you look at parents, I mean, as a parent now, being through the sporting system in all different factions from grassroots to professionalism, sometimes I would think twice about sending my child to a club environment, worrying about the issues that they may come across, like race, discrimination and prejudice, as well as some of these clubs are not really aware or adapt to the cultural and religious sensitivity. So that's a big issue, and I think some parents that I'm speaking to have those concerns. So, but what I reflect back to them is, look, work with the club. You need to work with them to provide them that understanding and awareness to make them more accommodatable.
They don't have the knowledge.
No, they don't, and some don't have the knowledge. Some, quite frankly, don't want to. Are not even bothered. But again, we need to bring about a change, and the only way to bring about a change is by working with those authorities and institutions, sporting bodies.
Can I just interject here? I mean, let me just say to the viewers before I forget, if you go to Headingley Cricket Ground or Leicester Cricket Ground, they now have prayer facilities on those grounds, and I'm not sure if there's any other grounds. But it was through a lot of work that Akram did, so we need to thank him for making sure that if you're a Muslim and you want to go and watch cricket at either Headingley or Leicester, that at least there is a prayer facility there. So that is the type of work that Akram does. So you also make sure that our Islamic issues are catered for. So let's go back. I mean, obviously some organisations, as you say, are not ready for that change to make their facilities more friendly for the Muslim community. But are the parents concerned that agar hamara bachcha wahan jayega to Angrez ban jayega, or he'll get out of the fold of Islam? How do you counter that argument then?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, there's got to be a balance, hence why there's got to be parental engagement. It's a must, whether it's a father or the mother, to play their part. And when I was playing rugby, there was very few, or hardly any Asians playing.
I was going to say probably none.
No, exactly. So there was a few playing in the school environment, but after school, playing in clubs, there was very few, hardly any. But more to what they give credit for, though. And it's a really shame that we didn't grasp the opportunity for them to continue playing their rugby and for them to progress. And we'd had more people playing right now, but that wasn't the case. And I think it's a two-way thing. But, for our parents need to listen to their children, understand them, support them, and provide that mechanism. So when the child is looking for an avenue for support, parents need to be there and encourage them to go and make them understand that if they want to do something that they enjoy, they will overcome these hurdles and make things better. And then the non-Asian community will have a better understanding and may reach out. So we have to reach out too to make things better for each other.
It's a two-way process.
Of course it is.
I've just been reminded that even Lord's Cricket Ground has got a prayer facility.
Excellent.
So I don't want to miss them out because I know the ECB would not be look on me very favourably. But yes, I agree. But the fact that you have managed to persuade Headingley, Leicester, and Lords, for example, places like that, to provide prayer facilities in itself is quite a huge turnaround, because I know not long ago they probably would have dismissed the idea, not taken that into consideration. But things are changing, because they also recognize and realize that the Muslim community is quite an integral, very valuable part of the economy of this region as well. So paying customers going through the turnstiles make a huge difference. And if they want to make sure that they survive as clubs, then they need to make sure that they provide the facilities for the Muslim customers who come to their clubs as well. But I mean, coming back, obviously what seems to be emerging here in this discussion is that the role of parents is absolutely crucial. And I must pay tribute to your mother, who, having lost your father at a very young age of 11, she must have been in a very, very difficult and traumatic situation. I don't know how many siblings you were, of raising young children. And mashallah, she's done a fantastic job in raising somebody as Akram.
Alhamdulillah. There were 6 of us, including myself. It was a difficult job, and she was my world and still is, although she's no longer with us.
All right.
But just on that, a different sport altogether, I'd like to just mention Kashif Siddiqui, still a current professional football player, only one of a handful of Asians who played in the professional ranks in America, Northampton, represented Pakistan.
All right.
But he, is very much all for his mother. The respect he shows for his mother. He lost his father at an early age.
Right.
But with his mother's support, he's gone on to be a trailblazer, playing football, but using football also as a means under his foundation, as an umbrella, set up the Altus Football Project, which we're currently working with at the moment, trying to inspire young children who are disenfranchised, disengaged, through the medium of sports. And you touched upon culture and religion, and that's part of the discussion that we're having.
We need to bring him in one day.
He would be fantastic.
He certainly
is a great role model.
Well. I mean, there are role models. Adil Rashid, for example.
Yes.
Some cricketers, who are internationally famous, right? And the others, and they are very strong practicing Muslims as well. They believe very strongly in the faith of Islam, and they adhere to it. And in fact, if you remember, I mean, I'm sure many of you will have seen it, that when England won the Ashes, basically, there's a tradition in the sporting environment that they open a champagne bottle and spray everybody with champagne. That in the cases of these 2 Muslim young players, what they do is they'll take the photographs, they'll celebrate, and then they will make sure that the Muslim players actually move away before they start celebrating with the champagne, etc. So the team members themselves respect the Muslim colleagues who play with them. And it shows that when we work with them, as Akram says, it's a two-way process. We work with them, we explain to them what being a Muslim is. I remember a very, very senior businessman in Scotland, a friend of mine, when his new factory was built, was opened by Princess Diana about 3 or 4 years before she died. And when he used to travel to his meetings with other big businesses, he used to tell me, he says, whenever we used to have meetings, the directors of the other company would turn around and say, Ibrahim, it's time for you to pray your namaz. Take a 10-minute break. You go and pray your namaz. We'll start the meeting again. And this is how they respected. He was a practicing Muslim. So they used to tell him, Tumhara namaz ka waqt ho gaya. Tum yu karo, tum namaz padh lo, we'll reconvene. So you're right. It's a two-way process. We need to be honest and open with them, and we need to show them and teach them about our Islam and what Islam means to us, and we need to practice it as well. But coming back, you've given 2 examples of mothers. Right, your mother and Kashif's mother as well. So the mother, we've been sort of concentrating on fathers, obviously, because normally it's the fathers who are seen as the role models. But how important, obviously in your case and the Kashif's case, mothers play a huge role as well, both in terms of religious education, all sorts of education. How important is it that mothers are engaged or understand some of these sports? Do you think there's a disconnect between, there's a disconnect between fathers. I'm sure the disconnect between mothers must be even greater. So what do we need to do to give those mothers some sort of knowledge and assurance about some of these sports?
Well, you know, on the other side of the coin, there are a lot of parents who are very, very proactive in their child's sort of mainstream activities, mothers and fathers together, and also single-handedly. In the early days when I was out and about, most of the time with work, traveling abroad in particular, my wife was taking my children out every single day to a sporting activity, whether it be boxing, football, rugby, but she was ensuring that they were taking part and having the best of what our local schools, local authorities had to offer. And her background as a teacher, and she understood that, you know, when children are at school and they're not really taking part in lessons, generally speaking, the teachers won't go back to them. It's the ones who are sort of listening, aware, and taking part in activities in school sessions that they'll focus more on. So she understood that for her children to improve in school, they need to be very active. So we need to encourage our mothers and parents, fathers as well.
But how do you square that, for example? That normally, you know, we want our children to come from school, go into madrasa for 2 hours, you know, and then obviously they don't have the time to do anything else. How did you manage to overcome some of those issues? You know, because those are a lot of parents face that as a challenge. A lot of parents, obviously, quite rightly, the first priority is Islamic education. So, you know, they want their children to come from school. 4 o'clock they're probably home, 3:30, you know, got an hour and a half, then they've got to go to madrasa 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, whatever it is in your area. And then obviously if it conflicts with sort of sporting activity, how do you square that circle?
Well, I was lucky because my mother, their mother, my wife, she was able to taught the Islamic Quranic at home as well as the education at home to the benefits of both. But that was down to her upbringing as well. So it just passed straight through. The thing what I would say is that parents need to take a real interest in their children. It's first and foremost, otherwise they're going to fail to recognise some of their contributions and achievements in doing extremely really well. So they need to look at ways of playing their part in doing that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you're quite right, and that's what we said earlier, that both parents, I mean, usually within the Asian community, the father is the more dominant figure. Right? Obviously, you've given 2 examples of very, very good mothers who have taken on the mantle of both being a father and the mother. And, you know, you've turned out, mashallah, by grace of Allah,
alhamdulillah,
your mother's support.
And I mean, in every household it's unique, so we can't say one way works for the other. Apart from saying there has to be a balance and a combination of both parents playing their part, whether it's the male going out to work, for example, and the mother staying at home. But still, you know, in this day and age, we can't expect the mothers to do the household, look after children and other things as well. There's got to be some give and take within that environment. And sometimes, if it's a tense environment, it reflects on the children, and they see that and they feel that. So again, it's that right balance, and it having a major impact on our children. As we see children, we're in trying times. At this moment in time, our children are lost to society.
That's why we want to talk about this. Our children are completely lost.
So we need to come back. We need to maybe look at ourselves as parents and reflect on that and see what we need to do for our children and listen more to them.
Do you think culture, parents are sort of so fixated about wanting to stick to their culture that they've got from back home, and that is a conflict at the moment within families?
Clearly so, because we're looking at examples of some of the issues, and certainly that will be one or two of those rationale behind it all. And for me, it's a case of, again, it's trying to get that right balance, but certainly the balance is top-sided at the moment because the children the parents are not able to communicate with their children. Even I sometimes find it difficult to communicate with my children. I need to understand why, and 9 times out of 10 it's a case of I'm losing the interest, and I need to make more time to listen to them and see what they're doing. And again, it's about advising and guiding them. Otherwise, if we don't advise them or guide them, somebody else certainly is. And 9 times out of 10 it's not the right thing.
Right, and hence, you know, people are looking at, as you say, there's a deficit there, and people are looking for other role models.
Agreed.
Right? And therefore, they're probably getting involved, engaged in activities that most parents, right-minded, right-thinking parents, would not be very happy with. But we know, as you know, when we spoke to Maulana Fazal Dadsab and others a few weeks ago, that some parents are ignoring, maybe deliberately or are too afraid to challenge, what their young children are getting involved with, particularly young boys, and they're not questioning where they're getting involved, how they're getting involved, where they're getting the money from, for example, their lifestyle, etc. And I think, is that something that fathers and mothers, particularly fathers, need to start really recognizing that those are some of the responsibilities that they should be taking on board regardless? I mean, how do you feel about that?
I'm still I mean, just to finish on the point what I just mentioned before, if some of the parents are not aware and maybe afraid to admit that they've lost control of the children, or they don't know how to deal with the situation, they shouldn't be afraid then to go find out and ask somebody best way of bringing them back, or learning, or trying to understanding that they can do a better job than what they're already doing. I think that's really important, because sometimes they ignore the fact that they've lost control. They don't want to admit it. And I think by admitting it and asking for help,
they'll be seen as a failure.
Is that it? Yeah, and they maybe don't want to do that. But whilst they're doing that, they're still losing the child even further and even more so. So get the courage to ask somebody for that advice.
Do we know of any organisation or initiative where parents can actually go and get some advice and guidance on how they may be able to do what you've just suggested?
Yeah.
They need to go and talk to the teachers. Are the imams, for example, sufficiently knowledgeable, skilled enough, in your opinion, to be able to do that? Or do we have this thought, dua karo, sab theek ho jayega?
First and foremost, do dua, inshallah, then things will get better. But continue to do dua, never forget, and never fail to do dua, because they will be answered, inshallah. But again, you need to act upon that dua too as well, and act upon some things that you say or that you're going to do. It ain't just going to happen just like that. But certainly the schooling, there's certainly ask the teachers. Maybe parents should take more active role in the schools opening, when they're inviting parents to go and find out about their...
Well, let's just ask you that question. Obviously, you must have had parents' evenings.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there's always been this disconnect between Asian Muslim parents going to parents' evenings. Has that changed over the last few years? Is it still as bad as it used to be in the 70s?
Yeah.
Very, very few parents used to turn up for parents' evenings.
Yeah.
Is that your experience still?
Yeah, I mean, in some of the schools that I'm still involved in, there's a 60% improvement on those figures. Right. So it is improving. And, I mentioned early on Gulfraz Gugzi Ahmed, who is a head teacher at a school, Pakistan Lane in Halifax.
Right.
The school is outstanding in different categories. Every time they get Ofsted inspected, so he's certainly doing something correct, and they have a large part engagement from the parents, so that helped the success.
This school is in Halifax.
It's in Halifax.
It's got a very large Muslim Pakistani community,
right in the heart of I'd describe as disadvantaged, underprivileged, but certainly the children are getting the best education. The parental engagement and involvement on the governors is fantastic, and they're certainly setting the world alight, and children are going on to bigger and better things. So it is possible, it can be done. It needs great leaders and role models.
So if he is a good leader and role model, are we then saying that some of the other schools, particularly where we don't have our people at senior management level, are failing to engage or attract people?
I think it's fair to say that.
It's both two-way process.
Yeah, of course it is. I think some are failing us. But again, then, our parents have an opportunity to go on the governing board, have an interest in attending the parents' evenings, and still coming to school. The school should have an open door policy where parents can come in to play their part, to help the school, because they can't do it on their own. It has to be a collaborative effort for the school to succeed, and that needs to happen a lot more.
And that's what the chair of Ofsted has recently said as well. That parents need to take more responsibility.
And again, what I see in school, I see a lack of it. I see a lack of care, love and affection, not just from the teachers, but from the surrounding. It's quite a cold environment sometimes. And some of these children don't have that at home, and they don't really get that anywhere. And when they go to school, and it's the first thing they see and learn from. I remember when I look back, I learned my first things at school, and it was a very warm, friendly environment back then. And certainly some of the schools, I feel quite cold when it comes to that. And I think maybe we should be looking a bit deeper into these children and their backgrounds and understanding about where they're coming from. We've seen the film Kes, when you've got the individual who maybe doesn't seem to be the brightest, but it's how we engage in that individual to get the best out of them. And I don't think enough is being done in that section.
So in terms of, when coming back, parents obviously play a very important role in the upbringing of the child, and this is something not that parents don't know about. Parents should know about it. If you're a good parent, you will know about it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, obviously the madrasa education and dini talim and other talim starts in the home. So if we are not concentrating on our young people when they're very young, I mean, look at Akram. He says by the age of 11 he lost his father, but the foundation that he laid from a very young age, actually, he says, stood him in good stead. So every father and mother, and I know there is a change taking place, there's no doubt about it. We are seeing more and more young people getting, parents that is, who are becoming professionals, there are businesses, and we've seen some changes taking place in that. As you say, we see more parents taking their children to school, other extracurricular activities, but that is still on the margins, isn't it?
It is.
It's not, it's not the norm.
Yeah.
So if you're an ordinary working class parent, or even a businessman, or a professional, and you're very busy in your life because you're just trying to make ends meet, how do these people then get engaged in this sort of work? Are the clubs willing to take on some of this responsibility? Football clubs, rugby clubs, cricket clubs, etc. As loco parentis for those kids. I know some of the cricket clubs do quite a sterling job.
They do, and I think they all have a part to play. And some of those clubs, as I mentioned with the Cashew Stick Foundation, do exactly that. Give the children a sense of belonging, ownership, make them feel very much part of what they're trying to achieve. And with their contribution, it all happens. And at the same time, teaching the young children the values and the disciplines and the character to be a good citizen, a good Muslim, and a good individual, and allowing them to fulfill their potential. Because so many children have so much potential, but we're not actually bringing it out of them, and it's lost. It really is. And as you say, they're seeking other avenues to seek what they probably think a betterment in their life, their
alternative lifestyles.
Yeah, it's very shortcuts, quick gains, fast way of making money. And as you mentioned, sometimes the parents are aware and maybe ignoring their duty and responsibility of maybe disciplining or advising the children. But again, are these parents the role models what the children needed to be aspiring to? Some of those parents probably involved and engaged in those activities as well.
Unfortunately, yeah. In some cases they are. So again, this is a huge issue that is affecting our community. As I say, we have seen the outcome of this, because in recent months we've seen in, for example, the Bradford area, I think about 6 to 7 young men have died as a consequence of all sorts of suggestions that they were involved in antisocial activity, maybe, and not saying if they were, but in criminal activity. They were driving very fast. They've got this fast lifestyle. Maybe they were engaged in sort of getting involved in criminal activity, and we've seen some real tragedies in this town itself. And parents need to start questioning themselves and asking, what are they doing to try and stop these young men? It's mainly men who are getting engaged in these very nefarious sort of roles of criminality, antisocial behavior, etc. We're coming close to the end of the program. What, in your view, are the few key things? We talked about parents taking more charge, more responsibility, being better role models. Any other things that you think are, mosque and madrasas we've hardly touched at the moment?
No, we haven't. They certainly play a large part to play, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And one of the projects that we're involved in is working with the mosque and madrasa, and we have come a long way in regards to those mosque and madrasa. Those imams are very proactive thinking, can relate to the children, have an understanding on their needs and adapting accordingly. So an institution, whilst we appreciate time is of essence and how much time they have with the children, I would like to see in an ideal world a madrasa function like an open centre where they're catering for the children's needs, whether it's the religious education, the normal education, as well as the sporting or shall I say outdoor curriculum activity where children are being taken away, their horizons are being broadened, they're learning new things. You know, just going back to school, you know, each year on sixth form, we used to take the children away. And I remember when as a professional, we used to go away for a weekend camp, and that's where we're laying the future planning, the discipline, the character for the full year. And that's a great example, a school taking children 10 years old away for a couple of days, laying the foundation for the full year. I think we need to do more of things like that.
Ikram, it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you very, very much. I think your past experience, your role model is an inspiration to many, many young people. I've known you for some time, and I look upon Ikram as a very good role model for young people to follow. As he says, the beginning of any child's growing up process is in the home. If the home lays the good foundation, both the mother and the father can have an influence for the rest of the life of that child, as is witnessed by Ikram here today. So we're really, really grateful to Ikram for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you found it inspiring and inspirational. Inshallah, we'll be back with you soon. In the meantime, take care. May Allah be with you and protect you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.